Welcome to the show today. Do you want to know how to save a life in under 5 minutes? Going to be talking with a firefighter here, my brother Sam, and what are the 2 things that you should know?
Yeah, I think the 2 things you have to know is CPR and you have to know bleeding control.
So not to bore anybody, but like, what does that really mean? So say my kid falls in the water, they're struggling to breathe. When do I know if I need to give them CPR?
Right, so CPR is going to be anytime, for the layperson, it's anytime someone is not breathing and you're not sure if they have a pulse. So a lot of people get really hung up on trying to find a pulse the right place. If you're not sure, push on their chest. There's really no 2 ways about it. In fact, the American Heart Association has reduced the difficulty of CPR all the way across the years to where now it's just push hard, push fast, and push when you think they need it.
Is there some kind of an angle? Is there some perfect situation that I need, or literally just apply pressure?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, if we're going to get really mechanical, you're going to push about 100 beats a minute, which if you sing Staying Alive, I think it's by the Bee Gees, that's the right tempo. You've seen the Office episode, right?
Yeah. No.
Oh, you got to watch the Office episode. So you sing a song in your head and you're going to be pushing at the right rate. And then you just try and, if it's an adult, push really hard. If it's a kid, push a little less hard.
I'm not sure if I would remember a song in that exact moment. So is it just something simpler, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
You can count. You're just looking to move the blood quickly. So all that's happening in CPR is you're pushing the blood around the body that the heart would normally do. You're extending the amount of time that somebody can be dead without having irreversible brain damage and things like that.
So are you literally giving... So if the person is, dead to the world and you're pumping the blood around, is their body just going to come back? Is that the idea of CPR? You're moving the blood around and then their heart just decides to start working again because it already is working?
Right. So right out of the gate, Baywatch when we were kids, total BS.
Really?
Not true. None of that happened.
I thought for sure that slow motion run was what I needed to do to approach a scene.
That part is absolutely true.
Okay.
The part that falls apart is when you start doing CPR, someone doesn't magically just... Thank you, I'm better.
Right.
That doesn't happen. What's normally going to end up happening is you're going to, say you start it on a family member, and we show up as a fire department. If you've been doing CPR and pushing that blood around, there's a much better chance that if this loved one comes back after transporting to the hospital and getting the, epinephrine and all these drugs that are necessary to kickstart the heart again, they're not going to have any detriment because the blood kept delivering oxygenated blood to the brain. That's what you're doing. You're making it so that if we can get your family member back, they're not going to have as many deficits. And that's a big deal.
So 2 scenarios. I've got one. Kid jumps in the water, looks as though they've been on the water for maybe a minute or 2. I was standing over here. I turn around. I see the kid. I'm like, holy smokes, they're underwater. Jump in. I get them. They're kind of in and out of consciousness a little bit maybe. What's the go-to? What are you doing in that situation? Just let them be?
In that situation, you're going to try and give them, air. They need air. Kids almost all the time need air. Adults almost all the time need heart. It's a weird way to say it, but basically, if a person is unconscious and they're an adult and a heart and they're not beating anymore, it's probably because their heart had a problem. But if a kid goes down, very rarely is it a heart condition. It's almost always airway, whether they got choked, whether they got, their lungs filled up with water. So you're going to be trying to deliver a certain amount of oxygen to them. But largely, it's just easier to tell everybody, just push on the chest. Hard, fast compressions that go deep enough to squish that heart.
Now, is there a reason? So you're not actually giving air now. When I was younger, that was the deal. You're trying to give air. So that is no longer the recommendation. You're just trying to move the blood around and let it do what it does.
Currently, community CPR doesn't really even worry too much about air delivery. It is mostly about pumping that blood around. And the reason is there's belief that crushing the chest and lifting up, crushing the chest, lifting up, you're also expanding the lungs. So the lungs are passively breathing a certain amount of air in as well. So again, we're just delaying the timer for death is all you're doing with CPR until you get the medications there that can actually do something about it. So pushing hard and fast and keeping that pump primed is way more important than making sure that you've got the right number of breaths and all those sorts of
So
things.
is coughing a good indication? We want them to cough, let them cough, do their thing. They're going to be just fine, or do we still need to go to the hospital after that point?
Go to the hospital. If you've got a drowning or a near drowning, there's a lot of further complications that can happen. Like a kid who near drowned but ends up gagging it up and everything, there's a chance that there's something more happening in the lungs that needs to get looked at from a doctor.
And what would be an example? Just they've sucked in a lot of water and they still have that in there, and that's problematic and needs to be removed, or just need to monitor them as they kind of pass whatever they're doing?
Yeah, so your lung is made to hold air. And when it gets water in there, that's a percentage of the lung that cannot move air into blood. So that's just square one. That needs to be monitored. But the second one is whatever water went into your body is likely not the cleanest water either and can be infected. And so you end up with like pneumonias and different bacterial infections that will come out of, depending on what water went into your lungs, those scenarios that you end up with pneumonia or something even worse potentially.
And does that onset like right away, or would pneumonia take a little while to actually truly feel the infection, I would assume?
The pneumonia would, but there are other things that would occur in a much shorter term. It's just post-drowning is a really dangerous time, especially for kids. So it's smart that if there is a drowning situation or a near-drowning situation, you go get them checked out by the doctor.
So to be very clear, if the kid comes out and still coughing and is like, "Ooh, that was a close call," everyone's looking around like, "Ooh, holy moly!" We were at a pool last year, just in our subdivision pool, and there was a kid underwater coughing and going crazy, and I was a lifeguard, as you were when we were young kids. I'm like, that kid's about to die. So I jump in, snag this kid out of the water, kind of coughing a little bit. I felt pretty good about myself. It brought me back to the glory days, grabbing little kids off the diving board. But nonetheless, you pull the kid out of the water, kind of coughing and whatnot, and obviously feared, terrified. I mean, I don't think they went to the hospital or anything. No. What is the line at which you would say, you know, this is probably a decent recommendation that most people would want to know?
Well, I'll say this. A lot of these kind of recommendations are really, you know, CYA kind of thing. Like we're trying to cover our rears to make sure that's not, you know.
Maybe say from a point of, when are you taking your kids?
When am I taking my kids? To me, if they're just small coughs, like, I got something, I'm probably not going to mess with it too much, me personally. If they're down at all, like they're not unconscious at any moment, I'm definitely going.
Right.
So then between those two is the gray area where you just kind of decide, how bad is it? Are they gagging up water? Are they doing those sorts of things? I'd probably still go. It's a really gray line in there, and people are going to do whatever they're going to do, but it's the same kind of thing that you run into with head injuries. Like when you have a head injury, when do you go to the doctor?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't personally, but I probably should. I was concussed many times last year and probably should have had some things looked at, but never did.
Right. And so the same kind of thing will be true of some of those gray area near drownings. It's like, well, do we go to the hospital? It might have just been a cough.
Right. So second scenario, you come in, a kid is face down. We've heard tons of things in the news. It's so depressing to have young kids and you hear about this kid is face down in the pool. What do you do in that exact moment if that is by chance you? I mean, are you calling 911 first? Are you getting, obviously I'm getting the kid first, but how do you juggle that scenario, and what should a parent do if they walk in on that?
Right. 911 is number one priority. And the reason why 911 is number one priority is they bring medicine to restart the heart if the heart is stopped. You can't do anything but delay death. So you pull the kid out, someone's calling 911, and then you start
What
CPR.
If you don't have a second person to call 911? Do you stop and call 911 before you snag your kid out?
You immediately grab like your cell phone or something nearby, hit 911, grab your kid, and as 911 operators, they're not going to hang up on you. So as you're doing the rescue, they're going to say, across 911, what's your emergency? And they won't hear anything.
So maybe put it on speakerphone and leave it on the pool deck and grab your kid.
Pull them out and then go over near to where your phone is, and they're going to start talking to you and ask you what you have. And you start CPR right there and talk to them on the phone while you're doing CPR.
So what is that CPR procedure for someone that has no idea what they're doing? What would they be doing?
Exact same situation. You're going to be pushing hard and fast.
Head straight up, head to the side. Where do you put the body? Hands down by the side. What do I do as soon as I get the child out of the water? What am I doing?
Yep. So as soon as you get the child out of the water, you're going to place them right there on the pool deck. You don't need to go anywhere else with them. Put them there.
Not a soft chair or something.
No,
just
it needs
put
to be
them on
hard.
the concrete,
you
right?
You want it hard. They're soaking wet anyway, so most of the time the concrete's not going to burn them. And plus, burning is the last thing you're worried about.
Sure.
So you're just trying to get close to the chest, move an arm out of the way, do something like that, and you're going to press straight down in the middle of the chest. It doesn't need to be landmarked. It doesn't need to be anything like that. Straight down, middle of the chest. That's it. And you're going to press hard and fast and looking to be about 1.5 inches, which most people are terrible at guessing. So just don't crush them to the concrete, but push pretty hard.
push pretty hard. And is there any kind of hand position that you would use? You know, if I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, man, I want to know. Like, do I put my hand like this?
Sure.
Do I put my hand like this? Do I do the old,
Right.
you know, I've seen some movies, so I've got some ideas, but what is the real thing I need to do?
So the biggest problem with CPR is people are so afraid to do it wrong. CPR is so much easier than we give it credit for. Put an arm on there, push hard and fast. That arm's getting tired, put a second one on there, push hard and fast. Both of them are getting tired, trade you push hard and fast. And don't stop until EMS gets there. That's it. Like, it is super easy, and most people don't do it because they're afraid they're going to do it wrong.
Right. So when you are doing this procedure, kid comes back, 911, police, ambulance, fire department, everybody's coming to the house still. Do I continue to do anything, or as soon as I see consciousness, hey, we've won?
If this kid is down, like you pulled them out and they're fully unconscious, the likelihood of them coming back in that moment is pretty low, because if their heart has stopped, they're probably going to need medications to kick it back up again. Manual compressions can sometimes do it, but absolutely keep EMS coming. Absolutely.
So you don't stop until someone shows up.
Exactly.
You just keep on pumping.
If they wake up, obviously it's time to stop. But
right.
But you're still going to the hospital with that kid.
Sure.
They have maybe died.
Let them go in the ambulance, like that kind of version, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Because if they're unstable, they've come out of the water, they have potentially had a heart stop. You want them in the care of somebody who can deliver medication to bring it back if they have a recurrence of that heart stopping.
Very good information.
Yep.
I like that. So the other thing I wanted to cover, you said two things. We got CPR and we've got water situations, and then bleeding control.
Yep.
I know that blood gets a little crazy sometimes, but say you've got a dirt bike incident, you've got a whole skinned up side, that kind of level of, I guess, a scrape. Is that something that's like dire that we need to, should I be placing stuff on it if it's gushing? Like in that kind of scenario, what am I doing for my family member?
Yeah, generally bleeding control is it's just a step up in care. First, you apply pressure, which directly to wherever the problem is. Second, you're going to increase pressure or elevate it up above the heart so that it can slow the blood to the area. And then tourniqueting has become a bigger and bigger thing.
So in this scrape scenario, most likely if I'm not seeing any blood squirting or something, just apply pressure with anything and everything?
Yeah, that's all you're really going to need, because the idea is the blood is being sent out to that capillary. It's probably where the scrape came, and you're just stopping all the capillary bleeding with the pressure. And then it'll scab up and you'll have probably not too big of a deal.
So what is the next level of that when it becomes more serious? If I come up on this motorcycle wreck, you 10-year-olds all the time riding dirt bikes or something along those lines, or maybe a car wreck would probably even be a better scenario. If I turn around, I see a kid or I see a family member, and what is the next level of that where I need to be, this is more serious than just some pressure? When do I know that I need to call the EMS or something along those lines?
So when pressure's not working, that's kind of where it steps up. At any point when what you're doing is not working, you got to get more aggressive. And so you've applied pressure. It looks like a pretty big bleed in the first place, and the pressure's not working. It's still bleeding through. Then we're going to start thinking along the lines of especially like battles and stuff, they go straight to tourniquets in that scenario. And the reason for tourniquets, which used to have a really bad name, working now is because we've done it a lot. We've been to war for 20 years-ish now, and we have a lot of soldiers that end up with injuries to extremities, and tourniquets have stopped the bleeding and saved their life because they don't bleed out on the battlefield anymore. Same thing can happen around, with a car accident or a lawnmower accident or a saw blade accident or anything like that, where there is extremity damage. You can stop that bleeding by putting a tourniquet on.
So if you see a puncture of any kind in a car wreck scenario, if you got a puncture in a leg or something, would you tourniquet that immediately if you were in the car and you seem to be okay enough to help?
Not necessarily. A puncture may not have enough bleeding. It may just be through meat. Like if you puncture your bicep, you're probably not going to have, you'll have some bleeding, but it's not going to be like arterial. It's not going to be venous, most likely, just because where it's at. But you hit a space that's like arterial bleeding and it's blump, blump, pumping out with your heartbeat, you're going to be losing blood quickly. And so, yeah, in that scenario, I tourniquet it very fast.
How tight is a tourniquet? Take the belt off my pants. What do I do?
The belt will be really difficult. So tourniquets are super cheap. You can go on Amazon right now. So I'll just say this. if you are at all worried about a bleeding injury, which should be literally anyone could have a bleeding injury. If you are worried about a bleeding injury, you should own tourniquets in your house and put them in places where your first aid kit is.
What if I don't have one in my car and I'm in a car? Like, what else should I use?
Right. So first, put one in your car. No reason not to.
Okay.
They're cheap. But secondly, you're going to use anything that you can get tight enough to stop the bleeding. So a belt could work. A piece of cloth or something that you can
like a
stretch to be
t-shirt?
really
Would that
tight.
even work? Like it was
It
long
could,
sleeves, thin
as
enough
long as
fabric?
as long as it's not going to rip. You want whatever it is to get tighter and tighter and tighter. So a Boy Scout method. Boy Scout method is you'd take, that bandana that you have, and you'd wrap it around the thing. You'd tie a knot in it. You put a stick on top of the knot, and you tie a knot again. Now your stick is a part of the knot, and you just spin that stick. And because you're spinning the stick, you're creating tension underneath it, and you spin the stick until the bleeding stops, and it will hurt like the dickens.
It'll hurt the individual.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Okay.
you got to think you are squeezing the body tight enough that the blood that is supposed to go from A to B can't get there anymore.
Right.
That's a lot of squeezing.
So when someone's screaming at you, you just keep going until you see that the blood is not pumping out with their heartbeat?
Exactly, because all that's happening with the blood pumping out with a heartbeat situation is you are emptying the fluid that's necessary to keep the rest of your body alive. So you got a big old hole in the tank. If you can plug the hole, then the rest of the tank gets to keep working. But as soon as that hole can't be plugged and you're not tourniqueting it, you're dumping out the fuel. You're dumping out the liquid that is necessary to get the blood to the brain and everything else.
So what if it's not an extremity? Extremity seems to be rather easy, simple concept to tourniquet. What if you're doing it and it's high in the hip?
Yeah,
in the stomach. And some of these core places, what would you do in that scenario other than pressure?
They need to get to a hospital instantly. Like there's not first aid really for core injuries that have heavy bleeding, because surgery is the way that you fix those things. There's nothing, like you can't tourniquet your chest. Like
Right.
It won't work.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this scenario would apply, but I'm pretty sure that if I get in a wreck, I'm going to He-Man it and be able to get my kid out.
Obviously that'll
So
happen.
I'm going to get this kid out if they're bleeding a lot. Would you get in someone else's car and take them yourself, or would you wait for an ambulance? What truly would be the best scenario? Are they going to be better because it's instant like that on the scene, or would you just get in a car and go?
So if you've been in an accident, you've had an adrenaline dump that's mind altering.
Right.
You're going to be coming off that adrenaline dump pretty quickly. And if you're driving a car when that happens, there's a good chance that you're going to make a lot of bad decisions, and you might not even make it all the way to the hospital.
Right.
Instead, your best bet is call 911 and try and stop any bleeding, get some airways open. If you come upon an accident and somebody is not breathing in the front seat, one of the best things you can do is just tip their head back and get their airway open. That has saved a ton of lives, and it's so simple to do.
So if I get in a wreck, guy's knocked unconscious, he's laying forward, it's literally just laying his head up on his car seat.
Yep.
What if it won't stay? Do you wrap it with a little towel or just hold
it
his
back
head?
there? Call 911, hold it back there. Again, we're talking life over limb. People are
Sure.
like, oh, what about my neck? They could have spinal injuries. This person's not going to live if they're not breathing. So spinal injury or not, having an open airway is a number one. That's when you do ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation. If they don't have an airway, all the rest doesn't matter.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So don't take your kid to the hospital if you think you're He-Man. That's probably not the best.
If you He-Man yourself out of the car, kick the door off its hinges, whipped your kid out, you might be spent. You're probably done. Maybe don't drive that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate the tips today. I think we should get into some more of these. I don't know if the listeners will like this, but I find it, on my own selfish standpoint, I would love to know more information like this. If you guys would like to know or have any questions, put them in the comments on YouTube, and we'll ask the firefighter what he thinks.